I'm Bethany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing at the individual and the collective level.
Join us as we invite guests to share their personal paths to freedom.
I've known Marika for an indeterminate amount of time, as we discuss in this podcast. I don't even know when I met her, but I knew that she was my sister. I knew she was my soul sister, and we've never not just been totally with each other, you know, as long as we've known each other. I really trust her, and I love listening to her like fantastic stories about all the ritual and all the crazy cool stuff that she's experienced in her life. And I have loved introducing her to Lauren, and I make it that they're friends now and that they get to go have their whole friendship and relationship and stuff like that too. So I love expanding, as Lauren always says, the mycelial network with Marika today.
I really love this because I got to see Marika kind of in her full glory. And I normally see her in a coaching situation, so very vulnerable and tender, which I also love that part of her. But she was just like in her glory the whole time, and all of the tools and resources and gifts around the divine feminine that it just feels like it's in her cells. It's so clearly part of her purpose, what she brings and offers as her medicine to the world. And I was just in awe of it as someone who is kind of just beginning to really create a relationship with my own divine feminine. Gave me something to lean into and to move towards. This is bringing my attention to my sacral chakra. I've been doing a lot of thanking this body for all that it holds. How it heals. I'm wanting to fully ground into my root chakra, into the place that I am right now. Invite a solid container to the space. Preparation for this conversation. What wants to be known will be known. Request just a relaxation in our bodies, an easefulness, a flow, a lightness. We could all use experiences that are light and easeful. Just move your body in any way that feels good to you. Support your presence. Whenever you're ready, open your eyes. What are we going to talk about, yo?
Well, I was thinking about this, and so there's like this whole like liturgy of experience, like around like all this stuff Marika's done around ritual and ceremony. Like it's a huge part of her zone of genius that I feel like Lauren doesn't know that much about yet. So I kind of want to talk about like Mama Gina's and just like your whole path of studying all of these different like groups and religions and cults and like all this, like all the stuff. Like you know so much about all this stuff, and I only know some of it because I've just heard like references to things over time. So I kind of like want people to ground themselves in like kind of what your life experience is around all the stuff that you researched.
Yeah, well, let's start with just like how you want people who are listening to identify you and what you want them to know about you to start.
So I identify as a ritual installation artist. And I would say a ceremony creatrix. Hearth tender. It's one of my sacred works in this life. And then I think lastly, I would sort of like hone in on my, it's sort of a combination of Enneagram and astrology. And I would say, I like to use the word tentacular.
I don't even know what that means.
Like tentacles, like spider and octopus. And the number 8 is super essential in my life. And I sort of identify those as like the feeler and the weaver. So yeah, it's always a list with me. Everything's a list. I'm a lister.
It's great. And how would you say your healing journey brought you to those things?
So, yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, it's rooted in childhood. And I think growing up, so my parents were both artists. Both of them were visual artists, musicians, and writers and teachers, both. And so I grew up in the church, and in a very liturgical church, but a church this liturgical Presbyterian church filled with artists, intellectuals, and writers. So I was kind of always steeped in this practice of kind of high ceremony in combination with poetry and art and music. And my parents were the church musicians. My dad was the minister of music. And my mom was sort of this, I would just say she was a singer. She was like a big, full-bodied woman with this voice that was really otherworldly. It was like both deep and low, and just this like fat voice with a really, really pure angelic register. And so she was really, my dad was kind of like, this is what we do. This is how we do it. These are the rules, like classically trained, all this stuff. And my mom was really just like this soulful feeler. And she was like the funeral singer, the wedding singer, the baptism singer. So I kind of grew up, I like to say that touch is my first language, music is my second language, and then, talking kind of comes after that. But I really grew up sort of literally within her soundscape. And she really trained me. There's one, so she had me sing with her a lot. So we were always singing. We were like the Von Trapp family church singers. And there was this one particular memory that I wrote about a while ago where we were singing for someone's funeral, and we were about to walk out on the stage, and I kind of started to fall apart. And started to like feel like my own feelings about it. And it was this like very otherworldly experience where she took my chin and pulled it up. She could be really, really fierce. And she like angled my head up. And as I looked up at her, she like walked in front of this light, and she sort of like eclipsed this light. And she just looked at me and she said, "Empty yourself." And then we like went out. And it was such a profound, like, just little moments like that of training around channeling, around sort of removing your ego from the process. And I just, side note, I think it's super funny because I currently live in a parsonage, not religious anymore. I live in a parsonage sandwiched between a funeral home and a wedding venue. And so I like to, I feel like all the transitional states and the rituals and rites was just kind of, that was part of my growing up.
So much about what you just said makes so much sense and are like mostly new things that I didn't know about you. Like how your dad has the, like, this is how we do it, and the rules and the rigidity. And like your mom has all of this just like feeling and takes up space and like has all this presence and stuff like that, and even her power. Like I see so much of you, and like that makes so much sense of who you are. And yeah, that thing of empty yourself. What I thought about, like, so, oh, we lost Lauren for a second. But you and I, we've done a lot of like work together, like consciousness work and all different kinds of things. And one of the things I've always noticed about you is like when it's time to do the thing, like you can drop in. Like even if you like have a lot going on or what was the word you said? You started to, when you were going to walk out on the stage, you started to what?
Empty yourself.
I started to kind of like feel my own feelings about it.
You started to unwind or whatever. Yeah. That then it was just like empty yourself and you found a way to like get present and like do what the thing was that you were there to do. So I've just experienced you so many times, like even if you have all this shit going on and like drama and like reactivity, when it's like, okay, I'm going to drop in and be present for this thing that's going to happen right now. Like, you know how to do that. Like, you know how to do that really, really, really well. And I always trust you to do it. So.
Yeah, I think my mom really modeled, like before I even knew what like holding space was, she really modeled, I would say like my personas got triggered. I like looked out into the audience and saw someone crying and I like got sad. I had like a response. I was like reacting. And I would say she really modeled this sort of like dropping all the egoic chatter and activity in my mind and kind of just showing up present. And I mean, really, it was really to show up to sort of be a field and a conduit for like the beyond. I mean, we were religious at that time, so they would really speak about it in Christian terms. But that was really my template. And it's interesting too because my mom was very conservative. And she had her rigidity in her own ways. And my dad was more in flow, like artistically. She had a lot of like hangups. But after she died, I remembered that I suddenly had all these flashbacks remembering her. Like she was like a potion maker. She would like grow plants. She was always sticking plants on my body, which I just like didn't even think about. And like, later when I was really, I super disconnected from the divine feminine because my mom had a whole lot of feeling, but it was also like unbound and it felt really chaotic to me and didn't always feel safe. So I really hovered over in the masculine for a lot of my life. But as I was sort of shifting back over and really, seeking out the divine feminine, and I started to remember, I was like, oh, she was a healer. Like she was like, and I found all these like plant medicine books in her like bookshelf when we were cleaning out the house. So that was really kind of like a nice connection that I hadn't made when I was younger. I was just like, mom's doing her weird plant stuff, sticking things all over my body.
Well, I'm thinking about like a couple of weeks ago when you were here, she was here, we were hanging out outside and she like invited Parker into making my 6-year-old into making a plant potion. Like he was collecting little flowers and twigs and stuff in the yard, and she was like, you can put that in some water and put it out by the moon and make a potion and make an essence. And he was like so dialed in, like he immediately resonated with it, and he like got and I got him a mixing bowl and we made a plant potion. So yeah, so much about what you're saying is like hitting and making a lot of sense. And what you said about teachers, poets, visual artists, singers, which is literally what you are. Like you're a teacher, visual artist, and poet. And even like your husband is a poet and does a lot of those very same things too. So everything makes a lot of sense.
When did your mom die, Marika?
My mom died when I was 23. We have, it's like a bad joke in our family that we can never remember the exact date, but it was 2010. So I guess I think I was 25. No, 23. I was 23. Yeah, that was so she had Alzheimer's, early onset, and so did my grandmother. That's a part of my story. That's a part of my
dad also.
Yeah, it's a really.
How old was she when she was diagnosed?
like 53.
Yeah.
Pretty young. Yeah, that was a really, I mean, if I just had an astrology reading the other day and they were looking at my chart and they were like, "Whoa, you would like have these like bursts, these like super intense bursts of like activity." And that was a really particularly charged, like potent time in my transformation. I moved for the first time out here to the Boston area where I live. And it was just this like rapid identity shift where I moved out here. I met my partner, Jonathan. I started dismantling. I started taking sort of like feminist sociology classes and started like dismantling kind of the patriarchy within Christianity specifically. And then kind of was sort of my first sort of like real sort of like liberatory look at culture and starting to break out of some of that. And then I got pregnant, and then I had a miscarriage, and then I got married, and then my mother died, and then I had 2 children. And that was a 5-year span. And I just completely fell apart, and I was really isolated. And that's really where I just really dove into my art practice. That was really grounding for me. And really I was just searching. I was seeking the divine feminine in so many ways. I mean, birth was a really powerful connector, that sort of threshold, those threshold places. But yeah, that was all of that like life, death, rebirth was just happening over and over and over in that period of time.
I have like strong associations with your motherhood we've known each other for a really long time. I don't remember like when we met. I don't know.
How long have you known each other? Let's start there. About.
I legitimately think we met on a street corner in Beverly.
I mean, that makes sense.
Are y'all the same age?
I don't know.
I think we are. I'm 30.
Best friends.
Best friends forever. Wow.
We don't know.
I'm feeling the love here.
This is the thing about Bethany is that somebody said to me, "You should meet Bethany." No, that's what it was. I was on a street corner. I think it was like with Nadia, and she was like, "You should meet Bethany." And I was like, "Oh, she sounds cool." And then we like kind of meandered around, and then it was like we skipped over all the information, and we just went straight into total presence, like processing, just like the deep stuff. So there's so much that we don't even know about each other on the surface.
Yeah, we just never did it. We just never did that part.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about you.
But like I remember early conversations that I had with you. One was I went to that apartment you had that was like in Danvers, like off of 114.
Yeah, the commuter apartments.
And it was like this weird apartment, and there's art everywhere. But we talked about sex, like in the most explicit, just direct. Like I speak very directly about like things that a lot of people feel very precious about, and there's not a lot of people who are just like meet me in the energy of like, yeah, let's talk about this. So we talked about sex. We talked in the context of marriage, like in like aliveness and how to keep things interesting and things like that. You were doing something where
were y'all both married? You were married when y'all met?
No, I don't think I was. I think she was.
Was it before you got married or after? Like I'm trying to get
it was after Marika was married. I didn't know her not married.
But had you been married?
I was not married. Mm-mm. No, I was not married.
You were not.
So this was like Christian Bethany.
This is post-Christian. This is like This is like 2007, probably.
Yeah.
And Marika, how old are you?
I'm 38. Bethany, I think we did have this conversation. I think we're the same age, and we have like we're like you're August and I'm October.
Yeah. Okay.
So
cool.
Pretty close together.
Okay, so that's out of the way.
Sorry, Lauren.
Details.
Yeah, so I think, Bethany, at that time, I was probably in the midst of Mama Gina's, which is, for those of you who don't know, Regina Thomas Hauer runs a school in New York City called the School of Womanly Arts, which is kind of a funny title. But the whole school is about pleasure and about reconnecting. It is definitely delves into sexual pleasure of all kinds. But it's a school of healing and reclaiming pleasure as a female birthright. And so lots of reprogramming. That was where a lot of like decolonization of like my mind and body started happening. And they talk about, sex, they talk about finances, you go through, fashion, like revamp, like figuring out how to like express your authentic self through fashion. They talked about religion. It was just this like incredible mix of like super, super high ritual and just like the funnest, fluffiest, like dance parties, just like amazing, deep, sacred, fun, sexy work. And I think was one of like, to be in a room of women aged 18 to 99, no joke, naked, dancing, not competing with each other, with the absence of the male gaze, like changed me on a cellular level. Like that much co-presence of people celebrating everything about themselves. Like to be in a room with 200 women loving their bodies just is, that was one of the highlights of my life, and definitely one of the sort of like jump starts to my healing. Like you can't go back.
How did you end up at Mama Gina's? Like what brought you to that? I'm missing like Christian upbringing. I get it. Like you're all that.
Then how do we get over into the weird?
Yeah. Right. So I jumped like almost immediately. I just like scrapped Christianity. I was like, one of the weird things about me and so my masseuse always says this. She's like, you come in totally rigid and I put my hands on you and it's like 30 seconds and you're just like healed. You're like relaxed in a second. And I am one of those people that's like a bandwagoner. Like if somebody's like, you should try this. This is really cool. And I'm like, yeah, I'm vibing with that. I'm in. I'm just like, yep. What is it? I don't know. So I just like scrapped Christianity. I was like, that is shit. And that has wounded me. And I can't even touch that. And I just like right turned into like Salem, Massachusetts and like psychics. I was like seeing psychics and like delving into the occult bookshops and just like, I was like, there is a whole world of religion based on the earth and like my uterus and like I don't know. I just right turned into it and I just couldn't get enough. So I was researching. I took a slight detour through like Buddhism and read a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh and read like Pema Chodron. The book When Things Fall Apart was like just that practice of like riding the edge and just like leaning into the edge and not numbing yourself at the edge. That really deeply resonated with me. That was one of the teachings that was another foundational piece for me in my healing. And then I pretty quickly careened into like goddess religion. And I found I was parenting at that point. I had 2 little kids and I just found that the way I was explaining the world to them was all earth-based. So we'd get to Easter and our family would be like, well, I'm talking about Jesus and like, resurrection. And I'd just be like, look at the plants. Look at the bunnies, look at the babies. I was just like, I was enthralled. It was like a whole, just my own fascination with my body. And then pregnancy and birth also was just like rooted me in the divine feminine in such a new way. So yeah, that's part of the sort of transitional narrative. And then I met an incredible dear friend of mine, Allison in Beverly. And that, it was just like the most serendipitous, like paths crossing. And she did Mama Gina's and she just said to me, you have to go. And I said, okay, I'm going. I'm just going to go. So I went and I took my notebook. And my backpack. And I was like, I am here to learn in my brain. And I like had my pen out and I was like, just waiting. I was like in the audience. And the doors flew open, and this like fabulous woman with like feather boa and like this massive headdress and this like silky sequin dress, followed by like a barrage of just like people fanning and waving her, just like erupted down the center
I'm
aisle.
about to Google this right now.
Oh my gosh. It is the most
What is her
incredible
name?
Regina Thomasauer. And I mean, in that first hour, I heard the word pussy so many times. And I just like, I was sitting there with my notebook, and then they're like, and now we're coming around with jewels for you to bedazzle your pussy. And everyone just strips off their clothes. And I'm still sitting there with my notebook, like little nerdy, like, what? And I just, I was like, I went to the bathroom and like nearly had a panic attack. And I was like, this is sink or swim. I was like, I'm just gonna, like, Allison was like, I later like texted her after, I was like, what the fuck? And she was like, I just couldn't tell you. I knew if I told you, you wouldn't go. And so I was like, sink or swim. And so I just dove in and ripped it off and started sticking stickers and tattoos. And then 30 seconds in, and I'm like, what is this? This is amazing. I love this, and that was my, baptism by fire into loving my pussy.
And over the years, I've just heard like little pieces of stuff that in my mind, like I've been to Marika's house and she's come out in a feather headdress. Like that's just like foundationally part of who you are to me, is just like fully integrating that whole Mama Gina's experience.
Yeah.
And the other part is like the bandwagon. I wouldn't call it bandwagon. I would just call it willingness and curiosity to just try stuff. Because that happened like around like the CLG model and coaching. You were like, I think maybe you got something for me on that. And I was like, yeah, try this.
Yeah.
And, we've been playing with that stuff ever since. But
yeah, I think
the things that stood out to me about you where you were comfortable to talk about sex directly and pleasure, and that was more scarce. I had kind of deconstructed Christianity too, and I was having sex, but I wasn't having a lot of conversations about sex with a lot of the women in my life, and then also just around parenthood, because I would call it conscious parenting now maybe, but like it was like attachment parenting. It was like, how do we think about what we're doing here and not just do automatic stuff? And before I even had kids, before I was even married, I was asking you a lot of questions about what you were doing with your kids. Like that, those are the two. I don't know when they were in time, and I don't know what happened first, and I don't even know how I met you and got into those conversations, but those are like vibrantly in my brain. And I can like picture you in that apartment having those talks with me. And I was just like, So whenever I was with you, I was just like 100% with you. And then sometimes it would be years and I wouldn't see you or talk to you. But then as soon as I'd see you again, we were just right back in. That's how it feels.
Yeah, I love, my favorite thing with people, I'm so like, I'm really heady, and I like, I'm really like administrative. It is an area of genius for me and very pleasurable. But I love when I meet someone that I forget the time. I just like, I'm not even conscious of time. It's my favorite. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, that feels so true. Lauren's like, how old are you guys? I'm like, I have no idea. When did you meet? No idea. It's felt so normal to not be conscious of time and space when I'm with you that I didn't realize that I didn't know those things until Lauren asked.
What about how does Mama Gina transition to ceremony, and how do you use ceremony as a healing practice?
So I think that there was, it's a really beautiful question. One of my biggest griefs with my mom passing away was that she lost her memory, and her mother lost her memory. And so my access to my own herstory, like my own female ancestral line, I felt for a long time was cut off. And I grieved I grieved that I went through my life with male mentors who performed rituals for me in very patriarchal, rationalistic, just like, rites of passage.
What's one? What do you mean? What men? What
like
rituals?
Catechism and baptism and, graduation from the School of Music and like very academic. You have worked hard and you have earned this thing and you have proved your worth and now you will receive this degree of some sort, like that kind of thing. And my family, I would say that my parents were artists and they got real psyched about church stuff, but I wanted like full ceremonies for everything. So I really, as a kid, had a lot of anxiety around transitions. And I think, we can go back and therapize. If you look at my artwork, it's almost all like this like string work. Like it's very obvious if you look at it that I have attachment issues because I'm trying to literally like hold everything together all the time. Like, and so I think because of my own anxiety around transitions, I like didn't want to let go. I was like super attached to things. I was over attached and then detached and just like, so I started to just self-soothe to sort of create transitional spaces for myself. And then I think as I sort of like shifted into more understanding and knowledge of other practices and other religions, where, there was certainly ceremony within the church, but as I started learning sort of like about like the wheel of the year and the turning of the seasons and all the sort of like, I could like feel it in my body and was like, oh, like here's the rhythm, here's the like shifting. And so I think for my family, when I created a family, which is, I call it hearth tending or hearthing instead of mothering. I just kind of landed on that word because I had a lot of like issues with mothering for a while. I started to kind of like create my own rituals for our family, and that became a really sacred practice for me. And then I think so Mama Gina's is a 9-month program. So it's this very gestational model. And I just learned how ritual could be just like serious and like, this like deep, serious sacred space. And then this like super light, like she just modeled a million different kinds of ritual. And so she was a huge teacher for me in creating rituals between women. And yeah, so when I graduated from Mama Gina's, I commissioned someone to make me a headdress and picked all the elements out and sort of like, Napoleon like crowned myself. And then that's what I wore for my graduation. Actually, I wore that and I was topless. So that was kind of that was my graduation from that program. And I would say after that, I sort of like kind of went back into just creating ritual with my family, but then also doing sort of like attending births of some of my friends and doing like blessing way ceremonies for them, just kind of like the people I love showing up.
Do you know what a blessing way ceremony is, Lauren?
I think so. A blessing way is a very specific thing, and I shouldn't use that word because I don't know the official thing, but I was sort of doing it. And then there was like also an official book, but for me, I should just say that I felt a lot of grief and anger around pregnancy where we're celebrating the baby, but not the transition of the mother. It was such a shocking transition for me as a mother, going from sort of like, I really didn't have community around me when I was a young mother. So I kind of went from being out in the world in this like thriving artistic community to suddenly feeling like very isolated and alone. And I think a lot of my practices come out of like wanting to hero other people from things that were really challenging for me. So yeah, I really, with all my friends, I wanted to like honor them, honor their transitions, that they could really fully be present to welcome their baby. And just noting, I think my sort of philosophy was like, I didn't even know that I would be grieving stuff when I became a mother. You know, they just prepare you for like, you'll be so happy and this will be great. And like, you'll have this new thing. But I really became attentive and maybe even resentful about, things that I wasn't ready to let go of, that I didn't know I would have to let go of, and adjusting to that. So I think my sort of attentiveness to wanting to kind of shepherd and show up for the transition of motherhood was something that I just started to practice in community with other people here. And then, yeah, it just kind of has been a really sort of like personal practice. And then I think recently has shifted into a more intentional project, and
we have a company.
We have a company.
It's a company. It's called the Wilderness Collective. I've mentioned it on this podcast like 17 times already. But yeah, it's Marika's project in my mind. She brought all the people together that participate in it. But it's a ritual, ceremony, ritual event, business experience. And Natalie, our friend Natalie's blessing way ceremony was the first time I ever saw you do this stuff. And I was just like, this is so cool. So how old's Frankie? 4? 5? I don't even know.
I think she's 5.
4, right?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not good
So,
with the details, just the deep stuff.
Yeah, we don't know about time. But a mutual girlfriend of ours had a blessing way ceremony that Marika facilitated, I believe. And I was just like,
I don't think you ever said what it is,
cool.
though.
It's basically a ceremony for the mother while she's expecting, while she's pregnant, that honors her experience, the fact that she's transitioning from, you know, not having a child to having a child, if you will, or having a second child. And like we all met and kind of we got with her and we all like spoke words to her and brought little offerings and like we all got candles. So when her labor started, we all like lit the candles at the same time. Like we had a text chain and we like let the candles burn at the same time so that we were kind of with her energetically in the experience, but we were there for her. It wasn't about like baby clothes. Like it was about Natalie. And so it was an entire, like there was design, there was art elements, like an entire room was transformed. And then we had ritual and ceremony sort of honoring the transition that was happening. And I just thought it was so cool. I was like, And I met like a bunch of people. Like I met Maya. Like I just, I guess I had known Maya, but not very well. So I just had like meeting all these people that were kind of into all this stuff. And I was like, this is fucking cool. And then years later, I had a hysterectomy for like health reasons, like cancer preventative reasons. And I was deep in my like own practice and healing practice. And, I did a lot of personal work and like coaching and stuff and feeling around it. But Marika offered to support me with a ceremony. And she came to my house and we invited a couple of close friends and my sister. And we marked the occasion of like, a big part of who I am as a woman is like coming out of my body. Like I'm never going to have a child again. Like my womb is being removed and not just treating it like sort of a procedure that was like kind of cold. She like brought a lot of like heart and attention and focus and support around it. And it was truly transformational. I ended up writing like a poem. I've never written a poem in my life. I like wrote a poem about it and like, it like really, I feel like brought me into a place of like feeling complete around what was happening. And I wasn't in so much resistance and so scared about it. So being witnessed in this moment, like the idea is we have transitions for weddings, funerals, and babies. And there's all this other major transitions in the lives of women that happens that are not witnessed and are not held by their community. And so it's about bringing like attention and support and witnessing and ceremony to other types of transitions. And I think it's sacred work. And I think she's a genius at it. And that's
Well,
that's
I'd
what
love
they
to
do.
hear, like, what are some of the other things? What are some of the other things that you do rituals for? And even like I wrote down, you have rituals for your family. Like help us and the listeners like see like what other things that we could be holding sacred and how.
So I think that I think there are really obvious, profound shifts in our life where we're going through an identity crisis, and we come. I mean, part of why our business is called the Wilderness Collective is because, and it's referring back to like being in the wilderness and sort of like that biblical wandering, and just this creating a circle of people around you who aren't there doing it for you. They're not like, fixing things. It's not about heroing, but it's about witnessing and tethering someone when they're on a wilderness journey. And I mean, I think this is not new. This is not like my idea. This is like ancient wisdom that I think, especially in white culture, we've really forgotten. So I don't really see this as my idea at all. I just feel like this is tuning back into like sacred ancient wisdom. So, I mean, I think there's physical changes. Sometimes it might be like a friend of ours had a sudden and really traumatic injury that was debilitating and shifted her whole relationship to her body. And it's been a years long process. So kind of like coming alongside her and being with her as she mourns what was and is suddenly thrust into something totally different. Sometimes it's something severe like the death of someone. So, I think we're thrust into identity changes, and sometimes we choose them. Sometimes it might just be moving from one location to another, which seems, it seems just like normal, like we do it all the time and we don't stop to mourn or grieve or just pause. But it's really, I think, a way of like slowing down and honoring the changes. I think there's also like shifts in relational structures, relational forms. Sometimes it's about like starting something new, starting a business. Sometimes it might just be, I think for myself, sometimes it's just a consciousness around shedding a particular identity, but realizing that it's going to take, or a pattern or a habit that I want to shift, but that shifting that means I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to feel like I'm in a new place, like I don't know myself. And so just honoring that as a way to sort of like bring consciousness to that discomfort. Because I think the wilderness can feel really scary, and like you don't know, up from down. So I think that we've done ceremonies. We've done ceremonies for like someone shifting. One woman wanted to shift into like a more deeply embodied connection. Like I think in one of your podcasts, maybe it was the one with Shayna, Lauren, you were talking about the soul contract. And sort of like moving into, I feel like that was a ceremony, really her coming into connection with her embodiment and really receiving that and sort of stepping into a new level of responsibility for her embodiment, for her erotic pleasure, and just sort of owning that piece of herself. Bethany is going to do a ceremony facing her fear, shifting into like singing in public. So some of them are really...
I'm coming to that one.
I'm so excited. We want you to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's like a birthday party celebration.
Yeah.
I want to stamp a couple things that I think are really important here. Because I've had I'm so excited to like experience your genius around this. I'm also really resonating with just the themes of like deepening the awakening of the divine feminine and how many layers there are to that, and like how much more I always have to go, but I'm really attracted to the additional angles that you're offering around it, and Mama Gina has offered you that now you're offering here. But I just want to say that, like, so I have an altar I work with now, and this has been new in the last year that I've been doing ceremonial work, and it was because a woman guided me and modeled it for me, and I've been following all the moon cycles and spending time with nature, and whether it's like leaving flower petals for a tree, or, just like really consistently having ritual, with all of just the cycles of the moon and the solstice throughout, like for a full year. And I really believe it like activated some, I want to call it wild, like pre-socialized, pre-domesticated part of my being, and ancestral part of my being. And so you said something along that effect earlier in the conversation, but I just really wanted to stamp that I think that, thankfully so many indigenous cultures have held on to their connection to these things in different ways, but there is a way that, I will just say, like, as a white woman growing up in Christianity, like, even though there were a lot of I would call them routines that now I understood used to be ritual, like the ceremonial piece, like that just wasn't a concept. It wasn't a part. And then the earth traditions and then the biggest thing for me is, and the plant medicine, and how it feels like a part of me is coming alive as a result. That was always there. That the wisdom is so much deeper than anything that I've learned in this lifetime.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I understood a kind of like cyclical nature of, like, I would call it tradition maybe within Christianity, because those religious ceremonies, those Christian ceremonies were really like, colonization of earth-based ceremonies and indigenous ceremonies, whether it's paganism or indigenous tribes. And so I think for me, sort of retaining the kind of like structure of like the wheel of the year, which is like a pagan concept, with the different sort of like guided by the solstices and the equinoxes, and then the holidays in between. That was really a beautiful like reclaiming of those cycles. And Lauren, I really resonate with the word wild. And I mean, I think that was one of my biggest resistances, and why I didn't like the word mothering for a long time. And I especially hated the word homemaker. Like I was like, like I'm not a homemaker. That just equated like being like stuck, and like just kind of like I felt really caged when I thought of it in that way. And a really foundational text for me was Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and it's a dated text. It's from the 70s. So there's a lot of really gender binary language in the text, which feels a little bit dated to me at this point. But that book was foundational in, I read, it talks all about like the wild nature. And there's all these stories, sort of retelling of, the kind of like very like whitewashed and like patriarchalized, the really powerful stories about women that were turned into like fairy tales. It retells those, and that was really one of my first encounters with my wildness. And they talked a lot about the life death rebirth cycle, and I think, that was such a gift. That embrace of wildness and all the things that women are generally taught. I mean, it's a little bit better now, but we're generally taught to keep under wraps: rage, anger, just that really. I think the word feral is one of my favorite words, and I know you've used it, but so I really considered like how and it sort of landed on this hearth tending, which felt like a very different thing when I think about a fire in the center of the home. And I felt like that retained some juice and some fierceness and this like, a really like a sacred temple practice that I really, connected with, rather than this sort of, it was something I could really step into with agency around, parenting and being a mother. yeah, that wildness. And I would say like a CLG word is like aliveness, but just like that tapping into a beautifully awake and alive state with your instincts intact.
What does ritual look like for you now? Oh, sorry. Or like, what are your more regular practices in your own life?
It depends on what I'm doing. I think I definitely have studio ritual. So when I'm working in the studio, I have certain, there's some things that are just routine. Like I wear these shoes and this outfit, this sort of like energetic entrainment. Like this is like what I paint in, or this is what I work in. There's some very like practical sides of ritual for me. And then there's prayers, and I do a lot of like arranging of crystal grids in my studio. My partner Jonathan is a incredible collaborator around crystals, and they kind of like do crystal installations all over our home. So we have a shared sort of practice of crystal installations. And that's
Wait,
part
can
of.
you stop with that for a minute? So
Yeah.
crystal gridding, talk to us about that.
So for us, it's a very intuitive process of creating, taking a lot of different rocks and minerals and stones with different, on a very basic level. Just it's a color composition at a very basic level, which I think affects in terms of like medicine and kind of like balancing things out. Color itself can be a really beautiful kind of medicine, but then there's also specific energetic properties to different stones. And so you can kind of create, I see a grid in the same way that I see like a museum or gallery space as like a sort of arrangement and a constellation and a particular relationship between elements that someone's creating. Crystal grids are just that on kind of a smaller scale. So creating a sort of a visual and energetic potion with intention. And so that's part of our ceremony as family as well. I mean, our kids are teenagers now. And so they're very eye rolly about it. Like they're just like, ugh, you guys and your crystals. I think for me, I am very sensorially oriented. So I burn particular essences and incense on different days of the week. So I try to help us all. And I'm borrowing. I'm like a borrower from all kinds of different practices. So, my friend Allison she's Jewish and really super intentional about Shabbat. And I really, in my family, that was like on Sundays, but it was always kind of fraught with going back to school. And so we kind of now shift on Fridays. And so I change incenses on Fridays and the kids light the candles. And we just kind of like in a very like physical and grounded way, shift our energy into like weekend energy. And that's something that we do together. And then I think for me, music plays a big part. So sort of having a consistent soundtrack helps us all kind of shift our energy together as a collective family. And then we've got these sort of like more serious and, quote unquote sacred practices, but then some of it's just really goofy ritual. Like we have family meeting once a week and we use these super weird finger puppets and everybody has like a weird avatar and we like fight in persona with our finger puppets and like the kids make fun of us. And, so there's a lot of like really light and funny ritual practices that we have. But for me, studio space is one of them. I have a bunch of different altars. Oh, and then I think for me, sorry, I'm just like talking a lot, but like I love cleaning out closets. Like I love cleaning as a ritual task. For me, when I'm feeling blocked, like if I'm just like low energy in the studio, I will just clean out a closet, like drag it all out. It's for me, that's just like a physical manifestation of moving energy. / my mom was a hoarder. And so I literally grew up as a very, very sensitive, super visual, very sensorial person. You can see me like shrinking as I'm talking about it. I grew up in a space that was just floor to ceiling, every corner, every surface. And I just, for my entire life, wanted to clean that house so badly. Like, just wanted to like pull everything out. It was like a manifestation of all the energy she had no tools to clear. And I just, I'm like kind of can be really not gentle about it. Just like throwing open a closet and just ripping everything out, throwing it on the floor, and then very methodically sourcing it. So I kind of like, I do a real mix of like sort of like very high ritual and just very practical, kind of like, yeah, practical rituals.
She always says, you can do ceremony in a parking lot, or you can do ritual in a parking lot. And I really appreciate that, because like I'm sitting here going, I don't do any of this cool stuff. But then when you said the cleaning thing, I'm like, oh, that's my thing. Like it's a meditation for what I'll like pull out all the kids' clothes and like take the things that are too small or the things that need to be repaired and refold them in a certain way and put it back in. And it is truly it does feel like a huge energy release shift thing for me. And I do a lot of that stuff. My house is very tidy and organized and stuff. That's definitely my thing. But I like how accessible you make this stuff, and that you're like a translator for the different audiences. Like we did one. So the house I live in has like an in-law apartment in the basement that I lived in for 2 years around my divorce. And I had my friend's family living in the main part of the house. And it was an exchange where she did childcare, and I in exchange for living in the house and stuff. And it financially enabled me to be able to afford to get divorced. And my story is, it was confusing for the kids because, Parker was 3, Finn was 5, I think. And we lived here by ourselves. And then, with my ex-husband, the 4 of us. And then Jesse, then the 4 of us moved into the basement apartment, and our friends moved in. So there's like 9 people in the house or whatever. And then Jesse moved out, and they started splitting their time between my basement apartment and Jesse's basement apartment. And then Jesse moved into a bigger space, which was in the same house, but moved upstairs. And then we moved back upstairs, and the friends left. And it was so much change to the, like in the home, and so many new, like, organizations around what adults are here, who am I listening to, like what's happening, and what are all the relationships between all these different adults, and how are they changing. So it was disruptive, I guess. And so when we moved back up into the house, this was like end of last summer, Marika offered a ritual, and the kids like got it immediately. Like I didn't even know exactly what we were going to do, but my siblings, who aren't necessarily like as comfortable or don't spend as much time with this kind of stuff. More just like kind of regular folks. And my mom came, and it was so simple. And she had stones from the ocean. We live right by the ocean, and ocean water. And it was like an opportunity to put memories in a stone and put it in the water to release it. So like we went in every room of the house. And then if there was something you wanted to save, she gave them little crystals in this little treasure box. And it was like, if there's a memory you really want to save and keep, you can put it in here. And they have these little boxes that they've kept these memories in. And then they let stuff go too. And I imagine, there was harder things and more like traumatic things that have happened in this house over the years that they were letting go of. And they got what we were doing immediately. Like they didn't need it explained twice. And so how like available we are just as humans to be with the meaning that we make, and like find ways to productively process our experience, I think. And to have people be with us in it, I think we like train ourselves out of it or something. Because there is a lot of plain ritual that people do that's totally normalized. And then there's like all this stuff that seems weird or different or like edgy or something like that. And it's, they're not.
Like, there's something coming up for me as you talk about like honoring the speed of life, which is the speed of trust, and how like the more that my nervous system settles, like, I cannot believe how little I'm capable of achieving in a day, or like comparatively speaking to like 3 years ago, I was working 65 hours. 10 years before that, I was working 70 hours and raising a infant alone or whatever. I just look back and I'm like, and I can't do like a 50th of that now, but I just feel my body is starting to align to the rhythms of the seasons. And, when you watch the seasons change, you don't wake up and it's fall. Like, it's this slow, gentle transition. It's its own kind of ritual, like easing it into the next space. And I just think that like capitalism, productivity, all the things that we've had to do to our nervous system to match the pace that the reality we created like required. So then I'll use this contrast. So when I left my job at KIPP, I really wanted to create a really authentic ritual for myself. And I invited like a handful of people who really meant a lot to me in my journey, parents, students. And we went through the building with Sage, and I like thanked the building. I really feel like she's a her, and I had like a relationship with her. I mean, we lived together for, 10 years at least. And then we went and sat in a circle, and I brought an orchid, which is like a divine flower for me. And we had water, and everyone took, had a cup of water, and then they poured it in the middle into this like container. And just talking about, they would say a memory or something that meant a lot to them about me, and they would pour it in the middle. And I will just say that like when I left there, I mean, I spent 15 years of my life. That was probably the most significant relationship, job, anything that I ever, and all the transitions in my life have been chaotic, painful, exhausting, dramatic. And when I left there, I was complete, and there were some other decisions too. Like I really started mentally transitioning 2 years before I transitioned. Like I think I actually transitioned at the speed of trust, like the speed that's, more normal. And my nervous system, I can just feel the gift of that in my nervous system. And it's changed so many things. Like even the way we like cut relationships, or all these things that we do, we just cut because of the speed that we've been doing life. And that isn't actually our natural, most embodied speed. And these rituals honor, the speed and also the power of transition and the impact that it truly has when I think we're awake and conscious to that process.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, Lauren. And I was thinking when you were talking about, I worked with little kids for a really long time. Well, not a really long time, but for several years I was working with toddlers, and just observed and felt in myself. It was a really early age at which the people around me started dishonoring my timing around transitions. So like every time we left somewhere, I would cry because I feel sad. Every time I leave someone or something, I feel sad. Like that's just how I am. I'm like, oh, things are changing. We grieve when things change. That's beautiful. It's perfect. It's part of how it is. But at a very early age, right, I was told, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. It's okay. It's okay. Look, here's the shiny new next thing. Here's the next thing. Don't you want to skip over this? Because I don't want to feel bad about that. Like everything that our parents do to cope and survive, parenting, which is definitely a thing, but it trained me really early that like, there's no time for me to transition. There's no time for this, like just we're moving on, we're moving quickly. Everyone else is moving faster. And so, creating a lot of, which only increases anxiety around transitions. And I think one of the beautiful things about being with children, if you are willing to let go and slow down and be not on capitalist time, but to really trust their timing, is that they know how to go to completion. If you have the spaciousness and the patience, and, we don't always, but one of the beautiful things about being a teacher is that you get to hold space. And then, it's kind of like being a grandparent, they go home. So I found as a teacher, I had a lot more patience than as a parent. But there's this, when you trust children, and when you feel trusted and the space is held and there's time, you grieve and you complete and you move on. And I really, as like a 20-something-year-old, there was all this just like negative chatter around like, why don't millennials ever grow up? Like they're all these like just like grown up children, like, rah, 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 rah. And I'm like, well, maybe if you gave them a fucking like rite of passage and allowed, like if we had prepared them or given them space or like honored them, or maybe if we were giving up power, like ready to move on and transition ourselves. But no, we're scared and hoarding power, and our elders aren't passing that on to us. And so I just
adapt for me, right? I go ahead, finish. I'm just excited to.
No, just like, I just see those things. I just see those things as really in connection. I mean, and really specifically with capitalism and capitalist time and sort of this need to like extract everything we can, and the way that disconnects us from our natural timing, which everyone knows how to do. And then we complain about how like no one's transitioned to adulthood and we have all these grown up babies, particularly, well, I could go into a rant about men, but I won't do that right now. But yeah, I have a lot of compassion, I think, around people who haven't had time or space to transition properly.
This makes so much sense to me because I always tell my mom, because my mom is one of those people that says those type of things about millennials or people. And I'm like, I know sometimes I want to say that I don't talk great about her on here. Like we have a lot of healing about, I love her. She's very grateful. So heroing myself, but like I would hide from my mom to take naps. Like I would have so much anxiety and like being rushed is like a trauma from my childhood, just feeling like we were rushed from one thing to the next, or like the days were so filled. There was never like just a day that we chill and lay around. Like that just was not a thing. And a thing I've told my mom, I'm like, you and dad have felt like emotionally, my mom has felt like 6 years old most of my life emotionally, and my dad maybe 14. And I'm like, you did adult things and you took on a lot of responsibilities, but I don't think that, emotionally that part ever got developed. And then so I feel like some of what we're seeing in our generation and the generations after are like this rebellion, like all those child parts, like we've got to have our space, we've got to have our time, we've got to fully develop. And then I see like with Talon, his little icon on my altar is a turtle, because everything, he just moves so slow. His development is slow. He gets dressed slow, everything. And so he makes my pace look high, but I see it as evolution, that I always see like a new generation is evolution. It's an improvement upon the last. So when we're complaining but what you're saying is adding like a whole different, I think about industrialization and the impact of taking people out of their homes and their hearths. That word is hard for me to say, the development, the interdependence that might have existed got really separated, and the development was impacted as a result. And so maybe when I'm talking about ritual, like reactivating something, maybe it's just that pace of our development and our cycles.
Yeah. I mean, interdependence is inefficient, which is like, it's on its own. I mean, inefficient in like capitalist terms. But yeah, the rhythms, what it takes to like connect with someone, and then like, I mean, I know this is sort of like, but like consciously uncouple, right? Like those endings, like just any consciousness around endings and completion and trusting the timing, which makes it, I mean, that's really, I just feel like we go through life at such a pace that we have 1,000 incomplete deaths just kind of like stacked up behind us that need tending and care. And this is where I think this is part of where all these personas come from, right? Like all of these like untended to selves and traumas, and
Yeah, we split. Like when we
Yeah.
don't have safety and belonging, and like I think our system knows it's not safe to develop and go through these cycles. So I have to split off in some type of way.
Yeah. It's just today was working with, I was working with some high school students, and we were looking at, we were discussing that. We were discussing like chakras and sort of energetic medicine, and it was really, I'm so interested in this generation who has, I feel like they have a lot of access and openness to this work, and like are bringing their own medicine and their own little like queer interdependent family structures. Like they're just
right, and know who they are so early, and like
and they're supporting each
totally
other
and like push back on any kind of attempt to socialize or control or domesticate.
Yeah, they're incredibly beautifully alive in a lot of ways. Super smart.
So what does all this mean to you about healing the collective? Like, what do you believe about healing the collective? What do you feel like is your personal mission around healing the collective?
So a couple things popped in right away. I mean, I think for me, part of what I see a field that's allowed to be fallow. That's part of what comes through for me in terms of restoring right relation to rest and balance. And I do believe that ritual is part of what, like we've been talking about pace, but it's part of what slows us down and allows things to die when they need to die. And so I guess I would say at like kind of like a meta level, I feel incarnated to heal and revolutionize the divine feminine on earth at this time. So that feels like sort of central to my work, but I feel like around that is like practices which allow the earth to rest, allow our bodies to function in balance, and heal and restore themselves, which I think they're fully capable of if honored and given time to rest and time to rebalance. So I guess I think that ritual is something we know deeply how to do, and ceremony. And I think we all have a way of being in connection with and in alignment with our natural, whatever is our sort of home cycle or our home pace. So I think I see this work really as just something to like bring back, to like remember. And then I feel like hopefully hopefully everyone will like recover that memory, like within the collective. And I guess I see it as a tool for fighting capitalism, for creating interdependence, alternate economies, and spaces of thriving, at a very different,
Well, what I know for
scale.
sure, that last piece about fighting capitalism, I think that might not be intuitive to people. And so I just want to stamp so even in my own life, like as I learn to go a different pace, all these different things in my life change. Like I cannot manage the same amount of things. The way I'm dealing with money is different just because I am not energetically, it's not in balance for me to be constantly monitoring my emails and all, just every single thing that I can create in my life so easily to do, the tasks. And I think as a collective, what I'm seeing like organizationally, introducing liberation is really about moving at the speed of humans and centering humans and creating systems that support humans to thrive, which means instead of making systems around productivity and efficiency, now it's like rhythms and cycles and, relationship ebbs and flows and dealing with interpersonal conflict and all of those things. So I just see that if we start to wake up to our cycles and the rhythms and connect back to the earth, and then also connect to these rituals and rites of passage, and recognize how much we need around transition, how much we actually need community and communal support, the rest of the world will have to change to adjust to that centering.
Yeah, I think as you were kind of like listing those sort of like characteristics of like industrialization and capitalism and white supremacy culture as well, I was thinking also just about like the practice, the sort of capitalist white supremacist practice, or it's colonial practice really of extraction, right? Extraction of resources, like extracting from relationships what we want and then sort of moving on, this really like extractive and exploitative practice. And I see there's so much like really beautiful work being done in transformative justice and work on interdependence. And Lauren, I think the other night you were talking a lot about accountability and sort of this like, not just sort of this like colonial practice of like, I want this, so I go to this relationship, I extract it, I take it, I source what I need, and then I like get out really quickly, and I'm not accountable. I don't look back. I don't see what's behind me. I don't grieve. I don't witness anyone else's grief. I don't even have to like experience the impact that I've had. I'm in, get what I need, and I'm out.
Which is like the soil, Bethany. It's like the
Right.
same thing that you talk about with soil. Like we just extract, dry out. And Bethany always says, like, if we just got out of the way, the earth could do her thing. We just got to get out of the way for her cycles, for her whatever. But the reason we're in the way is that extraction and that unwillingness to really be with the impact of it.
And it's really transformational to be the person who is doing who is being organized around to have their space to do the ritual and the ceremony, but it's extremely transformational to support somebody in it too. Like it's every one of these ceremonies that I've been a part of, even though it wasn't my thing, it was like someone else's ceremony, they've been so potent.
Well, it's teaching interdependence, and it's teaching attunement, and it's teaching connectedness, which should really say is remembering, because that's the piece. Even when we talk about community, what I'm recognizing is community is that level of attunement and that level of holding, and that is a remembering that we have lost.
Yeah, and that literally, like that word, like remembering, is literally like a dismembered body that's coming back together, which is where I see like the collective healing piece. Like then when Bethany has a ceremony, it is about her and she's sort of the focal point, but it's as much about me. My body is connected to her body. My field is connected to her field, and I'm experiencing it. And everyone in your field, whether it's your ancestral lines or your mom who's in the room or someone who you meet on the street, is like, it just starts to reconnect. And this like, we have all our devices for like connecting now, but like we know how to connect, like ancient technology, our bodies, our systems, our fields, like we're wired to connect as a collective. And so I see a lot of this work as sort of working on the body of the collective. And I do think, there was one piece that you said, Lauren, that I was just connecting back to, about like the fields and the sort of like restoration and the sort of like timing. I guess I feel like part of the wisdom and the medicine of sort of like of, I guess I'll say, the feminine is it's what it brings is it's a limiting, right? It's like a no, we stop now. Like this is like, like at the active energy is like charging, like produce, like let's go. And the feminine is like, no, let's stop. Like, let's pause. We need to remember. We need to come back. We need to hold. And I feel like in this sort of like era of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy are just like, oh no, we're not stopping for anything. This like overriding of the timing of like, no, it's time to die, it's time to be fallow, it's time to come in and like hold and go into the darkness and just like like be in that space, or it's time to let this go. That really I see, and that's where I see the like the woundedness in the divine feminine, and this sort of like this overriding of that really necessary impulse for balance. And that's what, as a collective, I feel like that's part of what ritual does. It honors those moments of pause. It honors things dying that need to die, things that need to be let go of, or things that just need to rest and not produce anything for a while. So I think that's one of the gifts.
Yeah, just honoring our nervous system and what it's telling us. I mean, I know that's been, I think all of us in different ways, all three of us have been going back to that practice, but I just see how, I mean, to work at the level that I was working and to do the things I was doing, I had to say, like, if you're hungry, you can't eat right now. Don't eat. If you need to go to the bathroom, don't. And then there are other places where I felt unsafe or betrayed or lied to. And I had convinced myself, no, it's okay. It's fine. You know, you're fine. And this practice of just honoring my body, and it's very, because it's not logical and you can't always explain why your body's like, I don't want to do that right now, or I don't want to call that person right now, or that doesn't feel safe to me. My body's a no to that. And this fucking genius, like I can't even believe sometimes. And I've been saying, my mantra's been like, the body is the GPS, the body is the GPS. And so it's like that is such a turned upside down reality from the way that we have been socialized, like that our brain and our logic, what we can see and what we know for sure is what we follow, what we believe are facts is what we follow, versus like, I have a sensation that tells me that this person is not safe or this is not where I'm supposed to be. So I just follow that.
Mm-hmm.
And then how the body can. Oh.
I was just going to say, she calls the GPS a great pussy in the sky.
Well, I saw that. I saw, cause I Googled her stuff, but,
yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
Even like, you know, well, I was just saying that like our bodies and even animals, they can perceive rain or they can perceive seasons changing. So our bodies actually start, I think, preparing for things that are coming that we can't anticipate either. Yeah. And I mean, so many of the clients I work with, you know, when they start really waking up and remembering and coming back into their body, they're exhausted. They leave their jobs. They feel guilty for wanting to rest. They feel guilty for how tired they feel. They feel like, you know, when I did a sabbatical when I left my job, and the first month I couldn't get out of bed, and I would just have this tape playing, like, you're so lazy, what, you know, and I was like, oh my God, this is all the programming that's been driving the hamster wheel. And I just watched it, like, and my body was like, no, we're not. I can't function.
This is big for me right now because, so currently I have a full-time job.
I have 5 full-time jobs, actually.
I have a full-time job. I do a podcast. I have a part-time job where I'm handling sales for Conscious Leadership Group. I'm a coach for Conscious Leadership Group. I have my own coaching clients. I have my own SC clients. I currently have 12 clients.
You have a ceremony business.
I have a ceremony business. I'm learning astrology. I'm facilitating coaches program. And when I have like a half a day that I don't have stuff going on, immediately the tape starts playing like, you're so lazy. Like, you're so lazy, Bethany. It literally plays all the time. And I know enough to talk myself out of it a good bit, but it doesn't stop really. And I'm like, I should. It really is ingrained in me. Like, it's one of the more true feeling things when I hear largely you two, mostly I'm in dialogue around like patriarchy and grind culture, but how true it feels. Like, I'm like, I slept 8 hours last night. Why am I tired?
and I really want to emphasize that it is programming. It's almost like I experience it as binary code that's coming in the energetic field, and it like a deprogramming process that has to come back. And like underneath it is our wild nature. Like I was looking at my dogs, they like wait for me to feed them. And it's like a big deal. Like if I don't do it at the time, like they're really regimented about it. And I'm like, they have no idea that they are fully capable of like killing an animal and getting food on their own. Like they have no idea, because I've socialized them to feel dependent, that food can only come from me. So all these wild instincts of theirs, we train them to make them go away so that they can be domesticated with us.
On our nice capitalist schedules.
Yeah, exactly. And quiet and all these things, right? But anyways, it's like such an example. That's what, Glennon Doyle Melton writes about in Untamed. But at the end of the day, it's just such an example. The more that I pull that stuff away and I'm like, what do I think is my food or my source? But actually it's not. And where did that come from that I believe that? And like, actually, what's underneath that? What's my wild, authentic nature? What do I most want when I'm separated from those types of domesticated beliefs? But I mean, it does scare me. Like I was saying, like my mom, she's so productive and very successful, but she cannot rest to save her life. She struggles so much to sleep. She is like all the time, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? She's always perceiving the next thing. And I've been kind of like, Mom, I think this is like fear. I think like, and she's like, no, this is just my personality. I'm a 7 and this is what we do. But I generally see people her age that I know that they seem filled with that push, like go, what's the next thing, prepare for the crisis, make sure you're ready, do the next thing, fill your schedule, do all the fun things. It's like this
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's so I can just imagine. I mean, I'm talking a real big game today, but like I'm also like very, very busy. And if my partner hears this conversation today, he will have the biggest eye roll because it's like literally the busiest week of my life right now. And he's like so mad at me. I'm like so out of balance this week. Or I'm very overcommitted. I committed to a lot of things. But yeah, I can imagine for that generation, the amount that there would be to face when they pause is so overwhelming that I can really imagine why they just want to keep going. Like, because I know for myself, I mean, you've seen me be barely able to dip a toe into the fear that's actually there when I really stop and tune in and do that work. And
yeah, I've had that thought about her, and like the thing that's different now is I used to be really judgy about it, and now I just grieve for it. I just like I can feel the grief all the way in my body down to my sacral, and it's just like I want her to rest. I want her to fall into support, and that I think, and now that I say that right now, that's also the one in me that's like really reckoning and recognizing like not only do I deserve support, I require it. Like in a recent medicine journey I did, it was not really a journey. It was like me taking mushrooms on a Saturday. Let's be real. But
practical
it was
ceremony.
like, yeah, it was, I did a
Recreational
ceremony. I did all the things. Right. But the message was like, you have to grieve how much the masculine and life, all the ways that you haven't gotten the support that you needed to be available to attract the support that you need. And then I saw women in my life in my mom's generation, and I saw how, like, I literally saw them in the journey, and like how, when they didn't get basic needs met, which are equal to food and water and sunlight, in terms of like deep support, emotional nourishment, probably space to rest, attunement, that they just were like, I don't need those things. Watch, I'm going to prove that I don't need them. And they built and constructed who they were and their reality off of like very little nourishment. and didn't fully face, didn't fully feel and grieve how much they longed and needed that support, all of those things. And so I'm really reckoning like we know that plants need sunlight or they don't live. Like human beings need more than just food and water. They need deep emotional attunement. They need physical touch. They need rest. They need, and like, it's not a luxury. And can we grieve and grieve with all of the people and things and times that haven't been available to give us what we need, so that we're available to start looking for it and believing we're worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think every time we do, it gives other people permission. Like, I think that's one of the powerful things about witnessing, is that the more you experience someone else in tune with their rest, the more permission you give yourself, hopefully.
I think so here's what happened. So December 2019, Marika got a group of women that she knows together and was like, I want to start this ritual, something like a business.
Okay, I was
like,
actually in bed sleeping, and I woke up and I literally felt this thing just kind of like blue, like plop into my lap. And it was like, these people, this is the thing. And I was like, all right. So I like wrote it down. I was like, I'm just going to wait and sit on it for a little while. And then I contacted you all like 2 months later.
And like, I knew Marika on and off, and I knew, I knew Maya a little bit, and I knew Annie a little bit, but like, she pulled these women together and she's like, said what she wanted to do, and she brought us all over. And we hung out at her house for a night and kind of talked about this idea of like starting a business basically around this, like starting a group, starting a collective. And some of the women I'd never met, and it was immediate soul sister. Like I can't believe I didn't know Mia and Carolyn before December 2019. I can't believe it. Like, it feels like we've been with each other for many lives. And like, we all just got each other immediately, and we started this thing, and we're like, cool. And we like put together like a loose plan for the year, and we wanted to experiment and do ceremony and ritual for each other, and like learn about the energies and like how much things take and cost. And it's like journey work, Lauren, because it's not just about the ceremony itself. It's about all the support before, support and integration after. There's like, we use energy workers, we use coaching, we use like writing exercises. I mean, we use all different kinds of things depending on what the, who the client is and what the thing is, what the ceremony is, what the transition is. And then COVID happened like a couple months later. And so my whole world like jolted to a stop. I was traveling probably like 2 to 4 times a month at least. And had like 500 close friends, like, 500 people that I was in some level of contact with every 3 to 6 month period, like spending some meaningful time with, and everything just like grinded to a halt. And I stopped traveling, and we kept doing our thing. And a lot of it was like Zoom or whatever, but we kept doing our thing. And it's like, I paused having energetic connections with literally hundreds of people, and like focused on this group of women, and like plus like Paul and Mario and like 1 or 2 other people, like really you, Lauren, like a very small people, my friend Sarah. And it's been so nourishing to invest in a small group, like a sacred circle of women, as Jim said I was going to do, but I didn't know I was going to do it, as we talked about on that episode with Jim, but I was like 10 months prior. But I think that's part of why I have the capacity that I have right now. And I don't feel burnt out. I do have that programming around rest, but I do rest. The programming plays, but like how much capacity I have at this moment, I think has so much to do with how much support I've received by being in close relationship with women who put importance on, we're in practice together. We care about connection. If there's a rupture, we go to it and we deal with it, and we're committed. We're committed to each other. And like when my shit in my life's been hitting the fan, like they're there. Someone's at my doorstep. Like someone's there with cards or with some touch or doing distance Reiki or like whatever it is. Like that, there's just so much support available, and I think it's allowing me to support a lot of people right now in really meaningful ways. So it's like this circular self-supportive ecosystem when you put that type of conscious attention and like love.
I don't have that yet, but I have observed the shift in you, and I can feel the call in me. And that is the thing that I'm understanding. I am available for so much more, and not more work or tasks or whatever. I am emotionally available for so much more creative energy and attunement when I am deeply supported in that way. And I love that you use the word ecosystem, because that's always what comes up for me, is like the way that ecosystems form to me is the most trustworthy like thing for me to put my attention on, and the interdependence of them, even though you could be a bug all the way to like a huge tree in the rainforest, but you're all interdependent. It's not like everyone's doing exactly equal, but there's equity. And so that's my hypothesis, is like getting deeply emotionally supported. And then the next piece for me is like also right relationship with different, like the way it feels in my body is like there's different kind of like holes, like that need something in the holes. And some of the holes are deeper and some of the holes are more shallow. And I think maybe it's different for every person, and maybe some things are the same, but like I can feel like an intimate core connection, how there's like a space for that, and that space would hold something. And then like friendships and children and parents, and there's like almost like a right constellation. And so then I think about the planets, who I think now, because Bethany really is the person that got me so in astrology, but I just think of them as like all friends that kick it and have different personalities and are like, it's like father, sun, and mother, moon. And then like the teenager is the earth. And then they have like Jupiter, and it's like my uncle Jupiter and like my aunt Saturn. And as they move, where the planets are in the solar system affects every other planet. But the gravity that's holding them, just that. And I'm like, I think we each have a solar system or have a constellation of people.
There's this really amazing feminist economist. Maybe she wouldn't identify as an economist because she's like an anti-capitalist ecosystemist, maybe. Her name's Cassie Thornton, and she started this project called the Hologram. I don't know if you've heard of her. And it's based on the solidarity clinics that sprung up in Greece after the economy collapsed. And it's basically, they call it a viral care network. And the idea, and Bethany, I really think it's very much what we're doing. It's an economy of care. And it's specifically speaking to like health, but I think so the idea is that to provide health care, in an anti-capitalist post-economy kind of sense, is that the person, so rather than the doctor being the expert and the person being the patient, the person whose body and life it is called the expert, and they are called the hologram. And there's a medical professional, and then there are, in Greece, the way it functioned was there was someone who knew the community, who knew the land, who would know your ancestry and your history in that way. And then there was like a friend, and then there would be like a medical practitioner. And so how Cassie Thornton went to Greece and studied this, and then she brought it back to the US and sort of piloted this program that's running now, that I participate in with some other artist friends. And essentially you gather 3 people and you make a commitment for life to meet once every 6 months. And
life.
And so
let's not get into the commitment issues.
So I'm in a hologram. I'm in a hologram with this woman I know who's in New York City, a woman in Germany, and a woman in Serbia. And so we meet every 6 months, and one of us holds the memory, talk about remembering the mental health memory. One holds the emotional health memory, and one holds the physical health memory. And the idea is that healthcare can be an art. So rather than having a medical file that's owned by the doctor, I have drawings and art that I'm creating while I'm listening. So it's a living record. And the idea is that, like, yes, there's times when you need to call the doctor for like some specific medical help, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's an incredible, miraculous invention that humans created. And I'm very like thankful for it. But that this viral care network replaces the trust in the body and in the social body to hold the memory and to help someone navigate their health decisions, which, I mean, I think, Bethany, it's so close to what we're doing. I mean, I think that is a ritual gathering. There's a format that Cassie created. It's very ceremonial. You start with embodiment practices. You shift. Oh, this is my favorite part. For the entirety of the meeting, which is 2 hours, you never use the word I. You speak as a we for the entire time. So you shift lingually into interdependence, and you're shifting your pronouns, it's an entirely different, I have total body chills right now, but it's an entirely different cellular orientation. We are a we. And the idea, it's also anti-reciprocity. So rather than being like, now I need to pay you back by doing this for you, your job is to go create your own hologram, right? So to like source for yourself. And then that's the viral care network. And it is a fucking dream. It is beautiful. I highly recommend everyone. Cassie wrote an incredible book about this project called The Hologram, Viral Care Network. And it's really transformational, beautiful feminist ritual work.
Yeah, using the word we would be like so transformative for our culture. But I also, the way you describe the hologram is how I experience my energetic system. Like I experience my energetic system that like there's a place that holds the mental memories, the emotional memories, the energetic memories, like, and that I can pull from those, and that they collaborate. And when I shut them off, like when my heart was shut off or when my body was shut off, then that collaboration wasn't existing in the system.
Yeah, there's definitely survival modes. That makes me think of the constellations you were describing too, Lauren, which are just other holograms, right? They're other constellations of support. And yeah, I think there's...
When we going to Mama Gina? When we going?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's a life altering.
Is there like an alumni program? Like, do you stay connected to that?
Yep.
Or?
Mm-hmm. So I, one of my favorite things, I know we're coming up on time, but I gathered post Mama Gina. I started a women's circle for students at the Christian college where I had attended. And I was like, let's do a sneaky little life lab over here for like anybody who's like Christianity isn't doing it for. So I was kind of mentoring, but like under the radar. Yeah. So basically I sort of created a curriculum that was somewhat Mama Jean-ish and whatever, included a lot of other like spiritual sort of transitional tools for women who are trying to transition out of Christianity. This is a side note. I was going to talk about Mama Gina's. In any case, so that year I signed up for one of my favorite life experiences. So I went through mastery as a sister goddess. That's your name. Everyone is addressed as sister goddess for the entire 9 months, which is also transformational. But I signed up to be on Team Pleasure, which is the practical support team. So they're the ones that you attend. It's an attendant. It was a full year of learning to attend, which is like the most glorious way of being a bridesmaid of all time, which is how I see these ceremonies, right? We are attendants to each other. Sometimes that means picking up the trash. For Mama Gina's, it was just support. It was like, you're there to bring tissues. Your job is to notice when a woman is grieving. Like that's your job. That's your full-time job. Your job might be holding the door. One woman's job was literally just to feather women as they walked through the door. to take a huge feather and just touch your skin as you walked through the door. And that woman was exquisite, the most exquisite featherer I've ever experienced. And back to your thing, Bethany, about like, there's days when you have like a half day and you're like, oh, what do I do? Or is this, I would love to live in a world. I'm just going to create it and envision it for a second, where like, sometimes I do one thing from like 9 a.m. to 10:30. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm full. I'd like to go to sleep now. Like that was my day. Like now I'm just going to like recover and rest. But like we have this like 9 to 5 or like 9 to 6 and then the like 6 to 9, like it's just so packed. And when I think about this woman who's like full embodied, the only job she had was to adorn and feather each woman that walked through the door. I'm like, I want a little bit more of that medicine. Like just like fully embodying purpose. So yeah, team pleasure was like the most pleasurable administration because it was also, and this is pre-CLG, but they were basically like, what's your zone of genius? Your job here is to be so deeply in your pleasure. That's your job. Be deeply in your pleasure and attend to these women. And that was a really beautiful way to organize.
I'm like deconstructing my labels about doing. Like one of the places I notice that I have the most freedom around doing is just when I'm with somebody. That's doing to me. Like all that programming shuts down if I'm in the presence of someone that I'm in an energetic relationship with. So that was one of the more powerful things about my old friend there, was we could be together for 3 days straight and do nothing, like forget to eat sometimes, even just being, because that like my story and whatever my belief system, I was like, this is a productive thing. This is meaningful. So you can replace the word productive with meaning. Like, it's like, this has my interest and I feel settled. And I notice like movement and growth and whatever, just from being with people. And I think that's why I might organize my life the way I do with so many people and interactions, because it just feels deeply meaningful just to be relational. And like witness and be witnessed, like my house is like an organism. Like there's people, thank God, and Marika's one of them, just stopping by, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And there's people who just come here to do their work or whatever. And that's how I want it that way.
Yeah. You modeled it and you create a container that can hold it. And then you made a porch that anyone can stop by. The healing porch. Beautiful ecosystem.
This has been juicy.
I learned a lot of stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for introducing me to Marika. I'm so glad you're in my orbit.
Thank you. Likewise, I really, it's really beautiful to be not just seen, but witnessed. And the one in me who loves attention was really pleasurably enjoyed being interviewed and having a conversation and just kind of navigating through your questions it's a really beautiful path through my life.
Well, I just think, like Bethany, you know, like the name of the podcast is The Healing Collective, which I always thought of like healing the collective. And Bethany, I think, thought of it as like a collective of healers, or like, and like it's like both become both of those things. But I'm really appreciating the way that it's becoming a collective of healers, and the way that we're like crossing and sharing and building a network between each other, even through this experience. So it's really
I'm psyched
cool.
for you to come to my ceremony.
I'm coming.
I'm terrified.
I brought one of my favorite ceremonial poems that I thought maybe I could close with. I know we're coming up at the end. And Lauren, I was thinking, Bethany, you've heard this poem 1,000 times by this point, but I was thinking, as Lauren, as you were talking, you were describing different like holes. This poem talks a lot about caves and being carved out. And I when you were speaking about holes, the word that kept coming to my mind was capacity. Not holes as like a deficit, but as like a space. So this is a poem that comes up in many of my ceremonies. It's really beautiful. It's called Mother Wisdom Speaks, and it's by Kristen Lore-Weber. Some of you I will hollow out. I will make you a cave. I will carve you so deep the stars will shine in your darkness. You will be a bowl. You will be the cup in the rock collecting rain. I will hollow you with knives. I will not do this to make you clean. I will not do this to make you pure. You are clean already. You are pure already. I will do this because the world needs the hollowness of you. I will do this for that space that you will be. I will do this because you must be large, a passage. People will find their way through you, a bowl. People will eat from you, and their hunger will not weaken them unto death. A cup to catch the sacred rain. My daughter, do not cry. Do not be afraid. Nothing you need will be lost. I am shaping you. I am making you ready. Light will blow in your hollowing. You will be filled with light. Your bones will shine. The round, open center of you will be radiant. I will call you brilliant one. I will call you daughter who is wise. I will call you transformed.
Hey everybody, if you've got any feedback for us, we welcome it, or ideas about future guests, email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com. We are at Healing Podcast on Twitter, and we are at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Monda Creative, who edits all of our podcasts, and Two Tall Women Productions, who produce. Thank you.